The scent of gardenias and champagne hung thick in the air, a cloying perfume of wealth and celebration. It was meant to be a joyous smell, the aroma of my sister Mariah's perfect day. But to me, it was the smell of suffocation. I stood in a shadowy alcove of the wedding venue's marble hallway, the smooth, cold stone a stark contrast to my burning face. My mother's voice, sharp and venomous, was still echoing in my head. "You're being selfish, Tessa. She deserves this more than you." I stood there, stunned into silence, the weight of her judgment crushing me. It was supposed to be Mariah's special day at the elegant Tampa Bay Hotel, a fairy tale wedding for the fairy tale daughter. But here we were, having another family crisis, a tempest in a gilded teacup, with me at its stormy center. All I could feel was the familiar burn of embarrassment and the cold, hard realization that no matter what I did, in my family's eyes, I would always be less. My name is Tessa Whitlow. I'm 26 years old, and I have spent my entire life being the afterthought in my own family. My sister, Mariah, was the sun around which our family galaxy revolved. She was the golden child, a living echo of my mother, Doreen, who had been a beauty pageant winner in her youth. Crowned Miss Citrus County in 1985, my mother never let us forget it. The faded photographs of her in sparkly gowns and rhinestone tiaras still decorated our family room mantel, constant reminders of her glory days. It was a success she had spent the last 24 years trying to relive through Mariah. And why wouldn't she? Mariah inherited our mother's striking features, the same cascade of honey blonde hair, the same startlingly blue eyes, the same natural charisma that drew people in like moths to a flame. Mariah could do no wrong. Her laughter was music, her tears were a tragedy, her every whim was a command. I, on the other hand, had inherited my father's quiet demeanor and, in my mother's opinion, his unremarkable appearance. My hair was a plain, straight brown, my eyes a simple hazel. I was the practical one, the responsible one, the one who was always there but never truly seen. While Mariah received dance lessons, modeling classes, and designer clothes, I was told to focus on practical skills like cooking and cleaning. When Mariah wanted to quit her part-time job at 16 because it interfered with her social life, my parents supported her decision without a second thought. When I asked for help with college tuition, they suggested I take out loans and build character through hard work. Growing up in the Whitlow household meant learning early that love came with conditions, and I, it seemed, could never meet them. The only person who ever made me feel valued, who ever saw me for who I was Grandma Helen. Every weekend from the time I was 12, I would take the bus to her antique shop in Sarasota. It was my sanctuary. The shop, Helen's Treasures, was a cluttered, magical world of forgotten stories. The air smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and the faint, sweet scent of the tea my grandmother was always brewing. She taught me everything. She taught me how to identify genuine Victorian jewelry by the cut of the stones and the style of the clasp. She taught me how to restore damaged furniture, the patient art of sanding, staining, and bringing life back to forgotten wood. She taught me how to spot the valuable pieces that others might overlook, the hidden beauty in the chipped and the worn. "You have a good eye, Tessa," she used to say, her own eyes, a warm and crinkled brown, watching me as I carefully examined a porcelain figurine or an old, cracked painting. "You see the value in things that others dismiss. That's a rare gift." My parents barely tolerated these visits. My mother often complained that spending time with dusty old junk wasn't helping me develop any real-world skills. She never understood that Grandma Helen was teaching me about history, art, and business, all while giving me the unconditional love I craved. When I graduated high school and announced my intention to study art history and business administration, my mother rolled her eyes and muttered something about useless degrees. Mariah, meanwhile, was busy winning local beauty contests and dating the quarterback of her college football team. She had a natural ability to command attention wherever she went, and my parents basked in the reflected glory of her success. They attended every pageant, every social event, every moment that showcased their beautiful, perfect daughter. For a moment, as I stood in that hallway at Mariah's wedding, a wave of pity for my mother washed over me. She had pinned all her hopes, all her unfulfilled dreams, onto Mariah. And now, this wedding was the ultimate culmination of that ambition. The problem was, they had financed this dream on a foundation of debt, assuming Grandma Helen's inheritance would be their safety net. They were wrong. 3 months ago, when Grandma Helen passed away from cancer, I had been quietly managing the antique shop she left me, along with her house in Sarasota and a surprising portfolio of real estate investments. For 3 months, I had been navigating my grief and the sudden, overwhelming responsibility of her estate. And for 3 months, my parents had made it clear they thought the inheritance should have gone to Mariah instead. When I finally tried to explain that this was Grandma's decision, not mine, my mother shut me down, treating me like some ungrateful child looking for attention. That's what led us to this moment. The wedding reception was in full swing just beyond the ballroom doors. Mariah looked radiant in her ivory silk gown, a vision of bridal perfection, surrounded by 200 guests who hung on her every word. I had tried to blend into the background, nursing a glass of sparkling cider and watching my sister dance with her new husband, Trevor. For a fleeting moment, I had allowed myself to feel happy for her. She truly did look beautiful, and Trevor, a handsome, successful architect, seemed to adore her. But that peace didn't last long. My mother had cornered me near the restroom, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and champagne. Behind her, I could see my father, Gary, standing with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He rarely spoke during these confrontations, but his silence always felt like a heavy blanket of agreement with whatever venom my mother was spewing. "This is ridiculous," my mother had continued, her voice dripping with frustration. "Helen must have been confused when she wrote that will. There's no way she meant for you to inherit everything while Mariah gets nothing." I felt my heart sink as I realized this wasn't going to be a quiet conversation. Other guests were starting to notice the commotion, their heads turning toward us with curious expressions. The last thing I wanted was to cause a scene at Mariah's wedding, but it seemed like that choice was being taken away from me. I felt my heart sink as I realized this wasn't going to be a quiet conversation, I'd thought, a knot tightening in my stomach. The familiar feeling of dread, of being backed into a corner by my own family, was overwhelming. "Mom, this isn't the time or the place," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the distant thrum of the wedding band. I tried to step around her, to escape back into the anonymous swirl of the reception. She blocked my path, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, no. We are settling this now. We're your family, Tessa. You owe us." "Owe you for what?" The question slipped out, sharper than I intended. "For everything. For raising you, for putting up with your peculiarities," she sputtered, gesturing vaguely as if my entire existence was an inconvenience. "Mariah is starting a new life. She and Trevor are looking to buy a house. This wedding, do you have any idea how much this wedding cost?" The admission hung in the air between us, heavy and foul. So that was what this was really about. They had overspent on Mariah's wedding, a grand spectacle to impress their friends and neighbors, and were now hoping to recoup their losses from my inheritance. "That was your choice," I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Grandma Helen's estate has nothing to do with your financial decisions." "Everything in this family affects this family," my mother shot back, her voice rising. "You don't get to just take what you want and ignore everyone else's needs." "I'm not taking anything," I replied, my own voice growing stronger. "I'm keeping what was freely given to me. By someone who loved me." "Love?" My mother laughed, a bitter, ugly sound that didn't belong in the perfumed hallway. "Helen didn't love anyone but herself. And apparently, she passed that trait on to you." I felt the last thread of my patience snap. "You know what, Mom? You're right. I am being selfish. I'm selfishly choosing to honor my grandmother's wishes instead of funding your mistakes." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're going to regret this, Tessa." mark my words. I was heading back toward the ballroom when my mother caught my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone in her late 50s. The music was louder now, and I could see couples dancing through the tall windows, completely unaware of the drama unfolding on the terrace. "We're not done talking," she said, her voice low and threatening. "Yes, we are," I replied, trying to pull my arm free. "I'm going back inside." "You're not going anywhere until you agree to do the right thing," she insisted, tightening her grip. "Do you see your sister in there? Do you see how happy she is? Are you really going to destroy that happiness because of your selfishness?" "I'm not destroying anything," I said, but my mother wasn't listening. "You've always been jealous of Mariah," she continued, her voice rising despite our proximity to the ballroom doors. "You've never been able to stand the fact that she's prettier, more successful, more loved than you'll ever be." The words hit their intended target, but instead of feeling hurt, I felt something else entirely. A kind of cold clarity that settled over me like armor. "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I'll never be as pretty as Mariah. I'll never win beauty contests or charm everyone I meet. But you know what I will be? I'll be the granddaughter who honored her grandmother's wishes. I'll be the person who built something meaningful with the gifts I was given. And I'll be free of this family's toxic expectations." My mother's eyes flashed with rage. "How dare you?" "How dare I what?" I cut her off. "Tell the truth? Face reality? Accept that you'll never love me the way you love her? You ungrateful." But before she could finish the sentence, her hand flew up and connected with my cheek in a sharp, stinging slap that echoed across the terrace. The silence that followed was deafening. Through the ballroom windows, I could see that several guests had noticed the commotion and were staring in our direction. My mother's face was flushed with anger and what might have been immediate regret, but it was too late to take back what she had done. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat of the handprint she had left there. Then I looked directly into her eyes and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of finality, of a door slamming shut forever. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Thank you for what?" my mother asked, confusion replacing the anger in her voice. "For showing me exactly who you really are," I replied, my smile growing wider. "For 26 years, I kept making excuses for you. I told myself that maybe you did love me, just differently. Maybe you showed favoritism because Mariah needed more attention. Maybe if I just tried harder, worked harder, achieved more, you'd finally see my worth." I took a step back, putting distance between us. But this, slapping me at my sister's wedding because I won't give you money that isn't yours, this finally gave me the clarity I needed. My mother's face had gone pale. "Tessa, I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," I interrupted. "You meant every word you said, and you meant that slap. And I'm grateful. Because now I know exactly where I stand." I could see my father approaching through the ballroom doors, probably wondering what was taking so long. Behind him, Mariah was visible on the dance floor, spinning in Trevor's arms, completely oblivious to the scene unfolding outside. "I want you to know something," I continued, my voice steady and clear. "Grandma Helen didn't leave me her estate because she was confused or manipulated. She left it to me because she knew I was the only one who would truly appreciate what she had built. She knew I would honor her memory, not just cash out and buy designer handbags." My father reached us just as I was finishing. "What's going on out here?" he asked, looking between my mother's stricken face and my oddly serene expression. "Mom was just giving me some final advice about family loyalty," I said, and I was thanking her for the education. I looked at both of my parents, memorizing their faces one last time. "Enjoy the rest of the wedding. I hope it was worth everything you spent on it." Then I turned and walked away, leaving them standing on the terrace as I headed not back into the ballroom, but toward the hotel's main exit. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name, but I didn't look back. I had finally found the strength to walk away from people who would never value me, and it felt like the first breath of air after drowning. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful, I had to admit. The Tampa Bay Hotel's grand ballroom was decorated with thousands of white roses and twinkling lights. Mariah looked stunning as she walked down the aisle, her smile radiant as she approached Trevor at the altar. For a moment, I allowed myself to forget about our earlier confrontation and simply be happy for my sister. I sat in the third row, wearing a navy blue dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. My parents were in the front row, of course, beaming with pride as they watched their golden child exchange vows. When the minister pronounced Mariah and Trevor husband and wife, the room erupted in applause and tears of joy. During the cocktail hour, I mingled politely with relatives and family friends, most of whom had known me since childhood. Several people asked about Grandma Helen's antique shop, and I was surprised to discover how many of them had fond memories of visiting her store over the years. "Your grandmother was such a sweet woman," said Aunt Patricia, my father's sister. "I bought my dining room set from her shop 20 years ago. It's still the most beautiful furniture I own." "She had such an eye for quality," added Uncle Robert. "I remember her telling me stories about the history of different pieces. She could trace the provenance of a chair back 3 generations." These conversations reminded me why I felt so protective of Grandma Helen's legacy. She hadn't just been running a business, she had been preserving history and helping people find beauty in their homes. As the evening progressed, I noticed my mother watching me from across the room. Every time I laughed or engaged in conversation with other guests, her expression grew more pinched. I realized she was probably worried that I was telling people about our family dispute. The truth was, I hadn't mentioned the inheritance situation to anyone. This was Mariah's day, and despite everything that had happened between us, I wasn't going to ruin it for her. When dinner was served, I found myself seated at a table with several of Mariah's college friends. They were all polite and included me in their conversations about their careers and recent travels. For a brief moment, I felt like a normal person attending a normal family wedding. But that illusion was shattered when the speeches began. Trevor's best man gave a funny toast about their college adventures. Mariah's maid of honor talked about their friendship and how perfect Trevor was for her. Then, my father stood up to give the father of the bride speech. "Mariah has always been our little princess," he began, his voice warm with emotion. "From the time she was born, we knew she was destined for great things. She's beautiful, talented, and kind-hearted. She deserves every happiness life has to offer." He went on to talk about how proud he and my mother were of the woman Mariah had become, how excited they were to welcome Trevor to the family, and how they looked forward to spoiling their future grandchildren. What struck me wasn't what he said about Mariah, it was what he didn't say about me. In a 20-minute speech about family and love and pride, he never once mentioned his other daughter. I might as well have been invisible. As he concluded his toast and raised his champagne glass, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. I had spent 26 years hoping that someday, my parents would see me, really see me, as someone worthy of their love and pride. But sitting there, listening to my father talk about family while completely ignoring my existence, I finally understood the truth. I would never be enough for them. No matter what I accomplished, no matter how successful I became, no matter how good a person I tried to be, I would always be the consolation prize daughter in their eyes. After the speeches ended and the dancing began, I stepped outside onto the hotel's terrace for some fresh air. The Tampa Bay glittered in the moonlight, and I could hear music and laughter drifting from the ballroom behind me. I was trying to process the emotions from my father's speech when I heard footsteps approaching. It was my mother. The rest of the ugly confrontation, the slap, the final, liberating clarity, followed. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a cafe in Edinburgh, Scotland, watching the morning mist roll over the ancient castle walls. The coffee was stronger than what I was used to back in Florida, and the air carried a crisp bite that made me pull my wool sweater tighter around my shoulders. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of legal meetings, financial arrangements, and long-distance phone calls. Before leaving Tampa, I had met with the estate attorney and a private wealth management firm that Grandma Helen had apparently been working with for years. It turned out that her modest lifestyle had hidden a much larger fortune than any of us had realized. The antique shop was now being managed by Eleanor Morrison, a former colleague of Grandma Helen's who understood both the business and the historical significance of the inventory. The rental properties were generating steady income through a professional management company. And the stock portfolio, well, that had grown substantially since Grandma Helen's passing. I pulled out my phone and reread the message I had received from my lawyer that morning. Certified letters delivered to all family members as requested. Your instructions have been carried out exactly as specified. Those letters contained a simple message: any future contact attempts would be forwarded to my legal team. All inheritance claims had been permanently resolved in my favor, and I was pursuing a complete separation from the Whitlow family. I had also included a statement that any attempts to contest the estate further would result in a countersuit for harassment and emotional distress. My phone buzzed with another message. This one from Eleanor at the antique shop. 3 new acquisitions this week, including a beautiful Victorian jewelry collection. Your grandmother would be so proud of how we're expanding her vision. I smiled, thinking about how Grandma Helen had always talked about traveling to Scotland someday. She had been fascinated by Scottish history and had collected several pieces of Highland pottery over the years. Now I was here, living the adventure she had only dreamed of. The apartment I was renting overlooked the Royal Mile, and I had already enrolled in a graduate program at the University of Edinburgh to study art history and museum curation. For the first time in my life, I was making decisions based entirely on what I wanted, not what my family expected of me. As I sat there planning my day, which would include visits to several antique dealers and a tour of the National Museum of Scotland, I realized I hadn't thought about my family's reaction to my departure in over a week. That realization itself was liberating. I had spent so many years trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. Now, I was learning what it felt like to live without that constant weight of disapproval and expectation. Looking back on that moment at Mariah's wedding, I understood that my mother's slap had been the final gift she could give me, the gift of absolute clarity about who she really was, and what our relationship would always be. And as I finished my coffee and prepared to explore another medieval street in my new city, I knew that Grandma Helen would have been proud of the choice I had made. I was finally free to become the person she had always believed I could be. And I intended to honor her memory by living fully and fearlessly in the life I was building for myself. The revenge I had chosen wasn't dramatic or public. It was simply the complete removal of my presence and resources from people who had never valued either. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and never look back, carrying with you only the lessons learned and the strength gained from surviving those who never truly saw your worth.